Civilization 7 is what happens when you lock a bunch of game execs in a room who don't quite understand the task. You can tell them to not worry because everyone loves the franchise, and hey, all you need to do is make a prettier, more tweaked version of an already great game, and yet somehow these lot had Lego in their hands and they decided to swap it out for Duplo. The real tragedy here is that under all the convoluted bollocks, the pop-ups that never sod off, and an age system that makes less sense than your nan's TV settings, there's actually a few bright ideas, but the big question is, why? Why fix what ain't broke? Why take a formula so bloody good and twist it into something for the sake of it that rarely adds new gameplay features? Well, put the kettle on, grab a cuppa, and let's dive into this mad science experiment gone wrong. I reckon we've all got a Civilization game imprinted into our DNA, like some weird ancestral memory where Gandhi's nuke-happy ghost still haunts us. My journey kicked off with Civ 4, and from that moment I was hooked. Hundreds of hours sunk into Civ 5 and then 6, like a proper digital dictator. And yeah, every new game brought its tweaks and twists. If you started all the way back with Civ 1, you've probably got war stories etched into your bones. But through all those changes, the very soul of Civilization remained, a grand strategy epic where you take some feeble, prehistoric mud hut society, slap a half-decent leader on the throne, and set off on a power trip of innovation, diplomacy, or just pure, unhinged warfare. And the best bit, watching your lowly stick-wielding cavemen evolve into a world-spanning empire with tanks and jets, absolutely steamrolling some poor sod who's still faffing about with longbows and catapults. And that right there, my friends, is where Civilization 7 cocks it all up. Civilization 7 takes a massive steaming dump on its own legacy. The big departure this time, your leader and your civilization, they feel completely disconnected from your empire. Take old Mr. Benjamin Franklin here. The bloke's got his science traits, helps you innovate, unlocks new tech quicker and all that jazz. But instead of starting out as America with its flag-waving, eagle-screeching dream, you're lumped with a civilization from the early ages. Let's say Persia, for example. Historically accurate, sure, but does it feel utterly disjointed? Also sure. And then it gets even more baffling. As you progress through the age, the game slaps you with a to-do list like build X wonders or do Y arbitrary nonsense. Fair enough, and it's here I can give credit of at least making the new age of being something that you truly work for. But before you hit that magic milestone, the game decides to punish you with a random affliction like a plague or some other catastrophe. No choice, just congratulations, you progress, now hold this L, you fucking loser. Still following me? Barely? Yeah, same here, because that's where it completely loses the fucking plot. The moment you enter a new age, you get to keep your leader. Teddy's still knocking about in my case, but your civilization gets binned. Persia? Gone, sod off. Instead, you have to pick an entirely new civ as the game effectively skips forwards a few hundred years. So in my case, I went from Persia to Inca, complete with their own units, traits and bonuses, but keeping all the buildings and wonders from before. And my question is simply this: why? Why in the name of Sid Meier's Bolden Head would you do this to us? Why am I forced to cycle through multiple civilizations instead of actually building one up into the world-dominating powerhouse? They somehow turn lemonade into lemons here. I want to play as America, for Christ's sake. I want to see a McDonald's on every fucking street corner. I want to go to the moon, plant my flag, and stick my middle finger up at the rest of the world for being a bunch of medieval peasants. I want to have the biggest military on earth and nuke every last thatched roof hamlet back to the Stone Age. But no, Civilization 7 doesn't want you to have fun. That is where the game execs in that fateful boardroom meeting, they got it all wrong. They forgot what made a Civ game so fun. And here's where it really hit me, something I never thought about until I got shafted mid-game by this nonsense mechanic. The moment that I was forced to switch civilizations, I suddenly realised I didn't care anymore. My connection to my empire was dead. Mr. Franklin didn't give a toss because this wasn't my Civ anymore. It was just a reskin of a reskin of a reskin. And every time the age ticked over, my units and buildings got swapped out like I was in some weird historical fashion show, and the civilization that I started to get attached to was all but gone. And the worst part, I was in the middle of a frickin' war. I was smashing through enemy defences, ready to deliver the final death blow to their capital. My army was primed, locked and loaded, and then bam, that new age kicks in. Suddenly, I'm no longer at war anymore. My units shift, my army's different, and I'm sitting here staring at the screen thinking, what in the actual just happened? A bug? A feature? Some cruel joke from Sid Meier himself? Even now, I have no bloody clue. All I know is this ain't civilization that I love and grew with. It's some bizarre identity crisis in a game that once knew exactly what it was, and now it wants to be different because it felt that was what was needed. I saw the same thing with Frostpunk 2, and I see the same thing again here with Civ 7. And if you're new to Civ 7, then Christ almighty, you're in for a bloody nightmare. You might think your PC's been hijacked by a dodgy porn virus, because you're going to be getting pop-up after pop-up after pop-up. The only thing missing is the bloke telling you that there's a hot single in your area. That first hour or two is an absolute information overload. It's like being waterboarded with tutorials. Every 5 seconds the game's chucking another mechanic, system or rule at you until you're just sitting there slack-jawed wondering if you accidentally booted up Microsoft Excel the game. Where Civ 6 was easy to love and learn, Civ 7 feels like it's trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded with oven mitts on while someone's screaming tax laws in your bloody ear roll. And you've got leader points to juggle, civics to enact, policy changes to faff about with, and a new town and city system. That's an interesting concept for sure, but with everything else going on, it all gets a bit lost in the way that it's actually presented. Civilization is known for having complex systems, but ones that are easy to learn. They have always slowly reeled you in as a newbie, and as you learnt more, you enjoyed it more. Here it sort of feels the opposite, because this is a more stripped back version in many respects of civilizations from before, but weirdly, the way it's all presented is a convoluted mess. They went too hard on the new systems, like they were desperate to prove that they weren't just rehashing Civ 6, and I'll be honest, I do respect them for that, but in their mad scientist attempt to reinvent the wheel, they forgot one tiny little detail, and it's that word again, fun. Now back to that town and city system I just slagged off a minute ago. I take it back actually, this is the kind of tweak mechanic I can get behind, because it changes enough to make you think without going full rearrange your entire brain chemistry mode. So when you kick off a new game, your first city is your capital city, and here is where you do all your usual Civ business, build units, construct buildings, manage resources, all that jazz, same as before. But the moment you start founding a second, third or fourth city, they're not actually cities anymore. In Civilization 7, they're towns, and here's where things get quite interesting. Towns are subservient in some respects. You don't just pump out units and buildings willy-nilly. Instead, you have to buy everything in towns with gold. And you know what? I actually quite like this. For once, they've made gold a proper commodity. It's now more important than any other Civ game before it. No more just hoarding piles of cash like Scrooge McDuck. You actually need the stuff to expand and grow. You also get a nifty little mechanic where you can redirect resources from towns to your main city. Want to funnel 50% of a town's production to your capital? Go for it. Suddenly, this starts making tactical sense. Proper empire management instead of just spam building cities like some imperialistic lunatic. And the best part, you can still upgrade a town into a city, but, and this is the clever bit, the more cities you have, the more stretched your resources get as they demand exponentially more than your towns. You'll get the benefit of self-sufficiency, but at the cost of thinning out your economy in a dramatic way. Now this could have been the big game-changing feature of Civ 7, and I would have been happy as a pig in shit. This actually brings genuine strategic depth to the table, and for once, a new idea that doesn't feel like they've reinvented the wheel just to set it on fire. So for me, this is a plus point. But as I said before, once you finally wrestle Civ 7 into making sense, it's the little things that start chipping away at your soul, and bloody hell, there's a lot of them. First up, the UI. Much has been made of how lackluster it is. And yeah, I fully agree. It's like they tried to make it cleaner and ended up making it more useless. You don't have easy access to key info, especially when it comes to where the hell your units are. Speaking of units, where the is the auto explore button? Unless it's some weird unlock I ain't discovered yet, or an icon buried deep under a mountain of UI sludge, you can no longer just set your scouts loose to do their thing. No, you're manually clicking every single turn, moving them one hex at a time like some unpaid babysitter, and eventually you'll just give up, send them to sleep, because frankly I can't be arsed anymore. Diplomacy debuffed into the ground. Gone are the high stakes UN Security Council votes that let you strong arm the world into your way of thinking. Instead, every negotiation feels generic, lifeless, and about as exciting as filling out a tax return. It took multiple iterations for Civ to finally nail diplomacy in Civ 6, and now they've stripped it right back to toddler mode. Then there's the map variety, weak, victory conditions, fewer, and maybe I'm losing my mind here, but in the modern era, time just seems to stop. We freeze around the mid-1900s where we're all stuck in some World War II time loop. No futuristic breakthroughs, no cyber warfare, no AI-driven political mind games, just tanks, planes, and a giant middle finger to progress. A game that's been in the works for a decade should be brimming with innovation. I wanted to see cyber warfare, robotics, a leaner, meaner, more complex AI system. Instead, we got a half-baked mess that feels like it's tripping over its own shoelaces, where the focus was in areas that have made it feel disjointed. Graphically, I'm in two minds about Civ 7. On one hand, it's ditched the cartoony style of Civ 6 in favour of a more realistic look. Now, I never had an issue with Civ 6 style, but I know a lot of people thought it looked like a Fisher-Price history lesson, so for them, this shift will probably be a win. And yeah, some of the intricate details on buildings, roof tiles, trees, little back alleys, they look pretty nice. But here's the problem, they don't look lived in. There's no movement, no soul. I'd have loved to have seen a vendor cart rolling down the street, a bit of smoke rising from a kitchen fire, maybe even some tiny peasants running around wondering why the hell I just built a granary inside a war zone. Anything to add a bit of life. And here's where they really fumbled the bag. World wonders. These should be majestic, awe-inspiring, the pinnacle of human achievement. In Civ 6, a game from almost a decade ago, they had gorgeous detailed animations showing you brick by brick its design. But Civ 7, lazy. They've stripped it back to just a few major steps, a lifeless, uninspired process that makes you wonder why you even bothered. Nothing about it feels wondrous. It's like ordering a 5-star meal and getting a packet of ramen noodles chucked at your head. But I will say, the unit animations are top notch, battles feel lively, the units themselves have great personality, and if only the rest of the game had this level of care, we'd be talking about a visual triumph. Instead, we've got menus that look like they were slapped together by an unpaid intern, basic, bland, and completely devoid of any style. And in a game where you spend half your life in menus, this is a big deal. But then, counterpoint, the map itself, stunning. The way tiles drop away with those slick animations as you explore is glorious. Probably one of the best visual elements in the game. But then we get to Civ 7's intro, which perhaps is symbolic of the current instalment. I remember Civ intros being grand, cinematic, and dripping with historical weight. They used to stir something deep inside you, making you want to carve your empire into history. Civ 6 had one of the best, full of energy, soul, and meaning. Civ 7, boring, bland, forgettable. And that's the real theme here. Missed opportunities. There's a lot to love about Civ 7's art direction, but also a hell of a lot to loathe. It's a game that flirts with greatness but never commits, like it's constantly second guessing itself, afraid to fully embrace its own identity. And that, more than anything, is its biggest crime. Not too much to say about the sound design because, well, let's be real, Civ games always nail it. The music is on point, shifting beautifully between eras and civilizations. There's nothing quite like bopping my head to a load of steel drums and bongos while my Inca Civ razes a village to the ground. The orchestral compositions, they're magnificent, and if you've got a decent sound system, it's worth cranking it up and letting the sheer grandeur of empire building wash over you. Sound effects, Yeah, they're serviceable, nothing mind-blowing, but let's be honest here, there's only so much excitement you can squeeze out of sword clashes and cannon fire. Now onto the narration. Gwendoline Christie is an inspired choice. She's got that commanding, regal presence that fits a game about conquering the world. I'll be honest, I do miss Sean Bean, not just because he made everything sound like he was in a smoky jazz club talking to you in your ear, but because he actually read the bloody script. And what I mean by this is that with Christie, she gets about one sentence in before she buggers off, like she's on a strict word count. You know that opening leader blurb when the game is loading up? Well, in Civ 6, Sean Bean would read the whole tale about your leader. But in Civ 7, Christie gives you one line and then just disappears like she's got somewhere better to be. And look, it's a minor thing, but it's just one more example of where corners have been cut. Civilization 7 carries a burden few other franchises ever have to deal with. The weight of expectation is massive. The content creators covering it are more scrutinous than ever, and the fan base, mate, let's be honest, they know the game's inner workings better than the devs themselves. We have to take all of that into account. But the cold hard truth remains, for all its grandeur, for all its beauty, for all its new ideas, Civ 7 just doesn't execute them in the way that we've come to expect from this franchise. And the whole way through this review, I kept asking myself, why? Why butcher the age system? Why force me to swap civilizations like I'm speed dating history? Why strip away the fun? This isn't a bad game, not by any stretch, but it ain't a great one either. And here's the most damning thing of all. When making this review, I thought to myself, I'll just grab a few minutes of Civ 6 footage just to show the lovely folks what I mean. Those few minutes turned into a 5-hour session. 5 hours of me being hooked again, building my empire from scratch, making America great again, with good old Teddy Roosevelt wheeling and dealing his way through the ages. And you know what? I haven't once felt that in Civilization 7. Until next time, my lovelies, Reggie